Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with this. There are moments in life that don't come back. A door opens, and if you don't walk through it, the opportunity is gone. A warning is given, and if you don't listen, the storm will overtake you. That's why I must tell you, this message is not just another video. This is a divine appointment. And the date, August 23, 2025, is not just a number on a calendar. It is a line drawn in eternity. Opportunities don't last forever. When God opens a door, it must be walked through immediately, or the chance may be lost. This truth is one of the most sobering yet life-giving realities in our walk with God. Life is filled with seasons, and seasons are never permanent. A season of planting is followed by a season of harvest. A season of preparation leads to a season of purpose. And a season of testing eventually opens to a season of breakthrough. But here is what many people miss. When God opens a door, He is not just offering a blessing, He is presenting a moment of destiny. And if that door is not entered in the time it is open, it will not remain available forever. Think of the children of Israel standing on the edge of the promised land. God had delivered them from slavery, brought them through the Red Sea, fed them with manna from heaven, and carried them with His presence. Then He said, "Now go in and take the land I have given you." But instead of walking through the door God had opened, they doubted, complained, and feared. They said, "The giants are too big, the walls are too high, the land will devour us." Their opportunity was before them, but they let fear and delay rob them. That door closed, and for 40 years they wandered in the wilderness until a new generation rose up to take what was lost. What does this show us? Opportunities from God have an expiration date. When He says move, we must move. Every open door requires both faith and action. Some people believe the door will stay open until they are ready. They think God's calling will adjust itself to their convenience. But opportunities are not built on our schedules. They are built on God's divine timing. If Noah had delayed building the ark because he felt too tired or too busy, the rain would have come and it would have been too late. If Esther had remained silent, refusing to risk her life before the king, her people might have perished. If the disciples had ignored Jesus' invitation to follow Him, they would have missed the chance to walk with the Son of God. Each story is a reminder that delay can cost you destiny. Often we fail to walk through the door because we think we have tomorrow. Tomorrow I will pray. Tomorrow I will pray. Tomorrow I will forgive. Tomorrow I will take my calling seriously. But tomorrow is never guaranteed. Scripture says life is a vapor, appearing for a little while and then vanishing. The danger of postponing obedience is that opportunities slip away quietly without warning until we wake up and realize what could have been. The greatest thief of destiny is not rebellion, but procrastination. Not saying no to God, but saying not yet. Kristen's story reminds us of this. She almost missed her door. She kept telling herself she had time, that God could wait, that she would get serious later. But later never came, until one night she finally said yes. The moment she stepped through the door, everything changed. Peace entered where fear once lived. Purpose replaced confusion. Hope replaced despair. But had she delayed any longer, she would have risked losing what God had prepared for her. That is the weight of opportunity. It is both a gift and a test. When God opens a door, it is not casual, it is critical. It is His invitation to step into something greater, to experience His power, to walk in destiny. But that door is not eternal. It is open for a time and then it closes. To ignore it is to waste it. To doubt it is to lose it. And to delay it is to watch it pass by. Opportunities don't last forever. When God opens a door, it must be walked through immediately or the chance may be lost. Procrastination is dangerous. The enemy doesn't need you to reject God outright. He only needs you to keep delaying obedience. This is one of the most subtle strategies the enemy uses against the people of God because it doesn't sound like rebellion, it sounds like reason. Procrastination whispers, "You will get to it tomorrow. You will pray later. You will read the word when you're not so busy. You will obey when life calms down. You will forgive when you're ready." And in those small delays, entire destinies are lost. The devil does not have to convince you to say no to God. All he needs is for you to keep saying, not now. The danger of procrastination is that it gives you the false comfort of thinking you are still in control. You believe that because you have not outright rejected God, you are safe. You assume that postponing obedience does not carry the same weight as rebellion. But delayed obedience is disobedience. When God gives a word, when he gives a command, when he opens a door, the expectation is for us to respond in the moment, not when we feel like it. Every time you say later, you are actually closing the gap where God's blessing was ready to be poured out. The devil knows this, and he knows if he can keep you distracted, if he can keep you postponing, then he can rob you of your destiny without you ever realizing it. Throughout Scripture, procrastination has been the downfall of many. Lot lingered in Sodom even after angels warned him to flee, and the result was devastating. King Saul delayed obedience when he spared what God told him to destroy, and it cost him the kingdom. The rich young ruler delayed surrender when Jesus told him to sell all and follow him, and he walked away sorrowful, missing the opportunity of a lifetime. Each of these people did not openly reject God. They simply postponed. But that postponement was enough to lose everything. Procrastination is dangerous because time is not guaranteed. Life is not promised to bend around your plans. You cannot say with certainty what tomorrow holds. You cannot assume you will have another chance. Every day wasted in delay is a day you cannot get back. The enemy wants you to believe you have endless time, but the reality is every moment matters. A single not yet can push you out of alignment with God's timing. A single later can cause you to miss the very miracle you have been praying for. Kristen lived through this reality. For months she delayed making a decision to surrender to God. She kept telling herself she needed more time, that she would be more serious later, that she could enjoy the world now and turn to God later. But each day she delayed, she felt more distant from him. Each time she pushed obedience to tomorrow, tomorrow seemed harder to reach. She was caught in a cycle where later became her normal. It was not until she realized that later was actually a trap of the enemy that she broke free. When she finally obeyed in the moment, she experienced a breakthrough she had been waiting on for years. The reason procrastination is so dangerous is because it disguises itself as harmless. It looks like patience, but it is poison. It feels like caution, but it is compromise. It convinces you that you are still okay with God because you have not said no when in reality, your delay has placed you outside of his will. The devil doesn't need to make you an atheist. He doesn't need to convince you that God is a lie. He just needs to lull you into endless waiting. And if he can keep you waiting long enough, your life will pass, your opportunities will vanish, and your purpose will be wasted. This is why procrastination is dangerous, because the enemy doesn't need your outright rejection. He just needs your delay. Kristen's turning point came the moment she stopped postponing and surrendered everything to God. For a long time, she carried the weight of her own plans, her own fears, and her own pride. She wanted to have control of her life, to call the shots, to decide when and how she would get serious about God. Like so many, she believed she had time. She believed she could always choose surrender later, when it was more convenient or when she felt more prepared. But the truth was, every day of delay was draining her, breaking her, and leading her further away from the very peace she was searching for. Her breakthrough did not come when she achieved something in her own strength. It did not come when circumstances around her got easier. It came in a single defining moment when she decided that later was no longer an option. Kristen bowed her head and released her grip on everything she had been holding on to, her pain, her past mistakes, her disappointments, her pride, and even her dreams. She finally said, "Lord, I can't do this my way anymore. I give it all to you." That act of surrender was not weakness. It was the beginning of real strength. The reason her turning point was so powerful is because surrender is the doorway to God's breakthrough. As long as she held on to control, she was blocking God's power from fully working in her life. God does not force his way into our plans. He waits for our permission to take the lead. Once Kristen opened her heart completely, she created space for God to move. In that instant, peace began to flood her soul. The confusion she had carried for so long began to lift. The heaviness that weighed her down for years started to break off. It wasn't because her circumstances changed overnight, but because her heart did. True breakthrough always begins inside before it manifests outside. Kristen discovered that surrender is not losing, it is gaining. She thought giving everything to God meant letting go of control, but she soon realized it meant stepping into freedom. She was no longer carrying burdens she wasn't meant to carry. She was no longer trying to fight battles she could not win on her own. By giving God the reins, she allowed Him to lead her into victories she could never achieve by herself. That turning point also shifted her identity. She no longer saw herself as a victim of her past or a prisoner of her struggles. She began to see herself as a daughter of God, chosen, forgiven, and redeemed. This new identity gave her courage, confidence, and clarity. She walked differently, spoke differently, and thought differently because surrender had unlocked the truth of who she really was. Kristen's story is a reminder that many people live right on the edge of breakthrough, but never experience it because they keep postponing surrender. They say they will give God everything when the timing feels right, but the timing will never feel right. They want to wait until they are stronger, but strength only comes after surrender. They want to wait until life gets better, but life only begins to change once God is in control. Kristen's breakthrough teaches us that the turning point is never about the future. It is always about the present. The moment she said yes to God fully, she stepped into a destiny she had been waiting for her whole life. Her story proves that breakthrough is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. And the choice is made the moment you stop postponing and surrender everything to God. God's timing is urgent, and certain dates and moments are divinely appointed. They require an immediate response. Time is not random, and it is not simply a cycle of days and nights repeating without meaning. God, who is outside of time, enters into human history with specific moments where His will intersects with our lives in a way that demands attention. These moments are not casual, they are critical. They are the kind of moments that can alter the direction of a life, a family, or even a generation. When those moments come, the worst mistake anyone can make is to treat them lightly or delay responding. All throughout Scripture, we see that God's timing is precise. Noah had to enter the ark before the rain fell. The children of Israel had to apply the blood of the lamb on their doorposts on the exact night the angel of death passed through Egypt. Joshua and Israel had to march around Jericho on God's timetable, not their own, for the walls to come down. Esther had to step into the king's presence at the exact moment when her people faced annihilation. Each of these examples reveals that God operates according to His divine schedule. And breakthrough only comes when His people align with His timing. To miss the moment is to miss the miracle. The urgency of God's timing is also seen in the way Jesus lived His life. Over and over again, He would say, "My hour has not yet come," or "the time has come." He was aware that every act of His ministry was tied to divine timing. The cross itself was not an accident, but an appointed moment in history where salvation was accomplished. If God's Son lived with such awareness of time, how much more should we be alert to the moments He places before us? To treat them casually is to dishonor the God who set them in place. Kristen's story reflects this truth in a personal way. For years, she thought she could choose her own timing. She told herself she would give God her full attention later, when things were less busy, when she felt more ready, or when she thought she had cleaned up her life. But what she did not realize was that God had already marked a moment for her breakthrough. That moment was not waiting for her convenience. It was urgent, and the longer she delayed, the more she risked missing it altogether. When she finally recognized the weight of God's timing, she surrendered in that very moment, and it became the turning point of her life. The danger many people face is that they assume divine opportunities will always come back around. They think if they miss one, God will simply wait for them. But while God is gracious, not every door remains open forever. Some doors are tied to very specific seasons. Just as harvest cannot be gathered in winter, Some blessings cannot be received outside of their appointed time. A delay in response can mean wandering in the wilderness like Israel or forfeiting the fullness of what God intended. When God's timing arrives, it carries both urgency and weight. It is like a window that suddenly opens, but it will not stay open indefinitely. To hesitate is to risk watching it close while you are still deciding. That is why Scripture declares, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts. Today is the key word. The timing is not tomorrow, not someday, but today. And when today is ignored, the moment may never return in the same way. God's timing is urgent, and certain dates and moments are divinely appointed. They require an immediate response. Surrender brings transformation, and when Kristen gave God her pain, past, and pride, she found peace, strength, and purpose. For much of her life, Kristen had been carrying the weight of wounds that never seemed to heal. She replayed mistakes in her mind, relived disappointments, and wrestled with the idea that she would never be enough. At the same time, she held on to pride, believing she could fix herself, prove herself, and manage her struggles without God's full involvement. But that burden only grew heavier. The more she tried to hold her life together in her own strength, the more it seemed to fall apart. What she did not realize was that the key to the freedom she longed for was not in doing more or trying harder, but in releasing everything into the hands of God. The moment Kristen finally surrendered was not glamorous. It was simple, raw, and real. She came to a place where she admitted that she could no longer carry the pain of her past or pretend that her pride was protecting her. In prayer, she laid it all down and said, God, I give you everything I have been holding on to, even the things I'm ashamed of, even the things I don't understand. That act of letting go was the turning point, because surrender is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of faith. It is trusting that God can handle what we cannot. What followed was transformation that she could not have manufactured on her own. Peace entered her life in a way she had never known before. It wasn't the absence of problems, but the presence of God's assurance that steadied her heart. The storms outside her did not vanish immediately, but the storm inside her finally stilled. That peace became her anchor, reminding her that no matter what she faced, she was no longer alone. Along with peace came strength. For so long, Kristen had been drained because she was trying to fight battles in her own power. But when she surrendered, she tapped into God's strength. Suddenly, situations that once overwhelmed her no longer controlled her. She began to rise with courage she didn't know she had. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, she found herself moving forward with boldness. That strength was not her own. It was the strength of God working in her because she had given Him permission to lead. The most beautiful result of her surrender was purpose. Before, Kristen felt lost, unsure of why she was even here. She tried filling the void with distractions, relationships, and achievements, but none of it satisfied. When she surrendered, God began to reveal that she was created for more. Her pain became a testimony. Her past became a platform for others to see God's grace. And even her weaknesses became places where His power could shine through. Purpose gave her direction, and with direction came fulfillment. She no longer woke up wondering if her life mattered. She knew she was walking in the plan God designed for her. The truth of Kristen's story shows that surrender is not the end. It is the beginning. Transformation does not happen by clinging tightly to control, but by opening our hands and hearts to God. Pain loses its grip when it is placed in the hands of the healer. The past no longer defines when it is surrendered to the one who redeems. Pride dissolves when we acknowledge that our greatest strength is found in His power, not our own. What once was a life of struggle became a life of peace, strength, and purpose, all because surrender brought the transformation she had been longing for. Your destiny depends on today's choice, and what you decide now, before August 23rd, 2025, can determine whether you walk into breakthrough or live with regret. Life is shaped not by vague intentions, but by specific decisions, and each decision carries consequences. Every moment is a seed planted into the soil of your future, and the harvest you will reap is determined by the choices you make in the present. This is why the urgency of today is so critical. Too often people assume that destiny is something distant, something that will unfold regardless of what they do now, but destiny is always connected to decisions. To postpone obedience, to delay surrender, or to ignore God's prompting in the present is to risk forfeiting the future He designed for you. There are defining moments in life when choices weigh more heavily than at other times. These are moments of divine intersection when God calls you to step into alignment with His will. Before August 23, 2025, such a moment has been marked for you. The decision you make in this season will echo into the years ahead. Just as Israel stood at the border of the promised land, faced with the choice to enter or retreat, you too stand before a door. To choose faith is to step into breakthrough. To choose fear or delay is to walk into regret. The tragedy of Israel's hesitation was not only the 40 years of wandering that followed, but also the lost potential of an entire generation. Their destiny was within reach, but their choice determined their outcome. Kristen's story reminds us of the weight of decisions. She stood at her own crossroads, wrestling between continuing to live on her own terms or finally surrendering everything to God. Her breakthrough did not come because the timing was convenient or the circumstances were perfect. It came because she made a choice. She could have easily chosen to postpone, to tell herself she would obey later, but that would have only added to her regret. Instead, she chose to respond in the moment, and that choice reshaped her destiny. The peace, strength, and purpose she discovered were all the results of a single decision to stop running and start trusting. What makes today's choice so powerful is that it is the only choice guaranteed to you. Yesterday is gone, and tomorrow is not promised. The only time you can act in is today. The enemy wants you to believe that destiny can wait, that obedience can be delayed, but every delay increases the risk of loss. Some doors will not remain open forever. Some opportunities are tied to this season, and this season alone. When God calls, He expects a response not at a later date, but in the present. Every day of hesitation is a day of potential wasted. And potential wasted eventually becomes regret. Breakthrough is never accidental, it is intentional. It requires a choice to step forward even when it feels risky, to trust God even when you don't see the full picture, and to obey Him even when it costs you comfort. Regret, on the other hand, is often the result of inaction. It comes not from making the wrong move, but from refusing to make a move at all. Standing still when God says move is the quickest path to missing destiny. Your destiny is not waiting in some vague future. It is unfolding now, shaped by what you choose today. The choice before you is not small, it carries eternal weight. Will you walk into the breakthrough God has prepared, or will you let fear, pride, or delay lead you into regret? The answer lies not in tomorrow,